Nothing comforts me like a plate of Japanese curry, full of tender meat and vegetables, paired with a bed of glistening rice. Today, let's make Japanese curry from scratch. We're going to divide this process into 4 phases. We'll start with the base, then the rice, the roux, and then we'll bring it all together. The base is the body of this dish, and for that, we're going to need 1/2 of an onion, but keep the other half around because we're going to use it later, 1 carrot, 1/4 of a kabocha pumpkin, and about 400 grams or a little under a pound of your protein of choice. We'll also need about 3 cups of beef stock. We're going to take our carrot and cut this using what's called rangiri in Japanese. Starting at the tail end, we're going to slice at an angle, roll the carrot a quarter turn, then slice at an angle again. Now what this does is it creates these abnormal shapes that are the same size from top to tail and look really nice as they cook down. It also makes each piece have a bigger surface area so it absorbs flavor better. So let's go ahead and set these aside. Next, we'll prep our onion. I'm just going to trim the stem and the root off, slice it horizontally down the middle once, then cut into 1-inch wide segments. Let's set these guys aside too. Moving on to our kabocha pumpkin, I'm going to take a spoon and scrape the inside to scoop all the seeds out. Then cut this into cubes. I'm using kabocha today because it is currently fall and pumpkin emanates fall vibes, but the magic of Japanese curry is that you can really use whatever vegetables you want or whatever is in season. In the spring, I like to make curry with English peas and new potatoes. In the summer, I love using zucchini and corn. Pumpkin, butternut squash, and turnips are great in fall, and potatoes of all kinds and mushrooms are great to use year-round. For the sake of flavor, onion and carrot are a must, but otherwise, feel free to get creative with your vegetables. And with that, all of our vegetables are prepped. Now to prep our protein. Here, I'm using beef chuck roast. Just like our pumpkin, you are free to use whatever protein you'd like. I've used pork, chicken, and even duck. Tofu could be great too, just add it at the end because it doesn't need to be braised for long. Or you could skip the protein entirely and have a very hearty vegetable curry. I'm cutting the chuck into slightly larger than bite-sized cubes because they'll shrink in the cooking process. Also, remember to trim a tiny piece as a tithe for your voracious and demanding void overlord. With all our roast cubed, we're going to generously season our beef with my umami salt and massage it a little just to make sure everything's evenly coated. And with that, all of our ingredients are prepped, so let's move on to making our base. We're going to heat up our pot over medium-high heat. And once it's nice and hot, we're going to add a tablespoon or 2 of a neutral oil, followed by all of our vegetables. Let's season these guys with a bit of umami salt and give it a good mix. We don't need to fully cook the vegetables here. We just want to develop a little bit of color and character. Once the onion starts looking a little translucent, we're going to add in our seasoned beef and mix it all together. Now we add in our beef stock and let this come to a boil. Once it's boiling, we're going to skim off the scum that's floating on top, turn the heat down to the lowest setting, cover, and let this simmer for 2 hours. Japanese curry simply isn't complete without some form of rice. So to make our rice, we'll need 1.5 cups of Japanese short grain rice and 1.5 cups of water. You can really use any kind of rice with your curry, like regular white rice, brown rice, or jasmine, but I personally prefer to use Japanese short grain rice for this dish. A very important step is to wash your rice because it's been through all sorts of places and touched all sorts of surfaces before getting to your pantry. But once the water runs clear, you're good to go. Into a heavy pot, we're going to add in our washed rice and water and let it rest for an hour just like this. Don't worry, we'll come back to finish making our rice later on. But for now, we're going to use this time to start working on our roux. Where the base is the body of this dish, the roux is really the soul. This is where all the flavors we've developed so far turn magical. This is what makes our what would so far be considered a stew into a curry. For this part, we'll need that other half of the onion I said to hold on to earlier, half an apple, 3 to 4 cloves of garlic, a teaspoon of tomato paste or ketchup, 3 tablespoons of butter, 2 tablespoons of flour, and 1 teaspoon of curry powder. First, let's chop our onion. We basically want this to be a mince, so after dicing our onion, I'm going to go in with my knife and chop like so. Next, I'm going to take our half of an apple and halve it again, take out the seeds, and peel the skin. Now we're going to peel our cloves of garlic. While I'm typically a pretty big fan of smashing the garlic to get the skins off easily, we're going to want these cloves intact for the next step. So no smash, only peel. For this next part, we're going to need a grater of some kind. You could use a cheese grater like this one and use the fine grating side, or you can do what I did and use a microplane to grate our garlic and apple. If you're smart, you would have grated this directly into a dish. But I was not, so I'm sadly trying to scoop this apple garlic juice thing into a bowl. With all of our roux ingredients prepped, let's heat up a small pan over medium-low heat. Now we'll add our butter and minced onion and mix them together. From here, we're going to let our onions caramelize. Now there are 2 ways you can caramelize your onions. You can either stand next to them and constantly stir over a medium heat, or you can let it sit and stir once every 5 minutes over low heat. I prefer the latter option, so I'm going to toss the onions one last time before I let them sit. Our onion is starting to show signs of being fully caramelized, but before it does, we're going to scoot them over to one side of the pan and add in our grated apple and garlic. What we're now doing here is having the apple caramelize alongside the onion. We're also getting rid of the harshness of that raw garlic by cooking it through. We're going to let this simmer for a few minutes just like this, but once you can smell that the garlic's harsh edge is gone, stir them all together so they can get to know each other for another few minutes. Now let's add our tomato paste, which is going to give our roux some nice additional color and some really great umami. At this point, our roux is starting to become a bit thicker, so I recommend using a flat spatula to press our ingredients together like this. Once that's nice and incorporated, we'll sprinkle in our flour and give that a good mix. Last, but certainly not the least, let's add our super important key ingredient, curry powder. Once it's mixed in and our roux is super fragrant, we can transfer it to a bowl and set it aside for later. It's finally time for us to bring it all together, but first, we need to pick up where we left off on our rice. We're going to bring our pot to a boil over medium-high heat with the lid off. Now that our pot is bubbling away, let's give our rice a good stir, making sure there's no rice stuck to the bottom of the pot. Place the lid back on and let our rice cook on the lowest setting for 15 minutes. After the 15 minutes have passed, turn off the heat and let the rice steam for 10 minutes. Now it's super important that you do not take off the lid until after the 10 minutes have passed. While we wait for our rice to steam, let's complete our curry by adding the roux to the base. By this point, our vegetables are super soft and the beef has become incredibly succulent and fork tender. With our pot still over low heat, let's take the roux that we made earlier and add it to our base. We're going to stir our roux into our base, but you'll want to stir very gently so that our meat and vegetables don't fall apart. Because yes, they really are that tender. As the roux dissolves into the base, what used to be broth transforms and evolves into this luscious, rich curry. Now that our curry is ready, let's check on our rice, which should be just about done. He is beauty, she is grace, and she is ready to be fluffed. So let's fluff our rice thoroughly by giving it a good mix, because our Japanese curry is finally ready to eat. All that's left is to plate up some hot glistening rice and hearty comforting curry. Take a seat and enjoy. Thanks for watching, and I hope you give this recipe a try. If you like this video, I'd appreciate you clicking that thumbs up button and hitting subscribe if you haven't already. This has been Duchess Dines, and thank you for dining with me.